Hello everybody, here is another awesome video of me talking about embodied language. Yes, it remains a topic that needs to be addressed, and I will continue to to speak about it because what else can I do? I've written something that I want to read to you because whenever I write something, it seems that I'm not rambling as much because I'm just putting it in writing. And you can tell that when it is written on paper, it is having a certain kind of solidity, if you want to call it that. Of course, there's not much solidity to embodied language because it is very fluid, but the reasoning behind embodied language is, of course, totally solid. I mean, you cannot deny that there is a difference between a person who is a speaker who listens to him or herself while he or she speaks, or a person who speaks but who doesn't even realize that he or she is not listening to him or herself at all. And so, since that is the way of talking that we all are involved in, we are all involved in what I call disembodied language, in which we do not listen to ourselves and in which we actually are afraid to listen to ourselves. Yeah. How how are we going to have embodied language if we keep being afraid to listen to ourselves? If we keep being afraid of actually acknowledging that there is a difference between the way of talking, the way of dealing with language in which we listen to ourselves. And you could say the mechanical way of dealing with language in which we don't listen to ourselves. We are afraid of that, and we don't even realize this. We don't realize that we are at a loss, in a sense. We are confused about this. We are not clear about this, why we are even doing this. Why are we not listening to ourselves while we speak? Yeah, I address this. And because it is making an enormous difference if you would listen to yourself. So here I start my writing. Since I have not only said what I wanted to say, I have also listened to it. And because I've listened to it, I have acted on what I have said to myself. And why was I able to do this? I was able to do this because I don't care whether you are listening to me. I listen to myself because I do not care whether others are listening to me. And a person is only going to be able to truly listen to him or herself if that person dares to be alone with him or with herself and dares to acknowledge that you do not care about the obvious disembodied language of everybody else in which people do not listen to themselves. So I do not care about anyone who doesn't listen to themselves. And yes, I will care about those people that do listen to themselves, although I have given myself this year, this year of 2025, I've given myself this year to just truly, you could say, catch up from all these years that I've been trying to let other people know about this. If I make this video, you can see that I'm not looking into the camera. I'm just looking at my paper. I'm just staying here with myself. I'm not even going to look into the camera today. into the camera, into my iPhone, of course. You can see me. But I'm just staying this year with myself. Maybe at another time I will look into the camera again. But for now, I just want to look away and make a statement with that I'm on my own. I'm not with you. I'm not with anybody who sees this or who listens to this. I'm here to talk about my own experience. Because I know from my own experience that you are always reverting to your disembodied language, even if it may seem that occasionally you seem to be a little interested in embodied language. Yeah. I mean, of course, the reality is still the reality. And the reality is that we are not listening to ourselves while we speak and engage continuously in disembodied language. While, of course, there is for every one of us the possibility to have embodied language and to listen to ourselves. That's still the reality, even though we are having a habit, we are having a conditioning which makes us act a particular way. That doesn't mean that the reality is changed because of our belief, changed because of our stubbornness, changed because of our, uh, what is it? Yeah, our tendency to not want to be alone, to fear to be alone. That is also the fear of embodied language, is also the fear of being alone. Anyway, so yeah, occasionally you may have a little bit of interest in what is embodied language, but you never have interest in it enough to continue with it, to actually pursue it, to let it determine your life, like I was just describing. Yeah, you're not just only speaking with yourself, no, you're listening to it, you're acting on it, and then you see the consequences of your own way of dealing with your language. When you act on your own embodied language, then everything begins to change for the better in your life. So if I were to wait for you, I would have never have any embodied language, and I would only experience it in an accidental short-lived moment in the same way as you do. Yeah, you don't experience embodied language in the conscious way as I do. You only experience it in an accidental, momentary, yeah, fleeting moment, which is gone before you know it, and you don't even know what it actually was. You don't even know that you were having embodied language. And of course, you never consciously listened to yourself and talked with yourself to begin with. So even if the circumstances are positive and supportive for you to have embodied language will naturally occur, because, yeah, that is what people have when they feel at ease, when they are safe, when they are not threatened, when they feel, calm, and, when they are able to be truthful and to be you could say uh, yeah to have their own way of expressing themselves. Let's put it this way. Yeah. But so even though those situations occur, we do not really realize that such a situation in which you can really be yourself and express yourself, we do not understand the tremendous importance of that, and to create that for ourselves, by ourselves alone, like I do right now. I'm just talking with myself. And so you could do that. Everyone can do that. And then you will notice how important it is, the difference between your own disembodied language and your own embodied language. So I would never have any embodied language, and I would only experience it in the accidental short lived moments as you do. I have ongoing embodied language, but on my own, and my life is determined by this crucially important skill. Yes, it is a skill which I could only acquire by turning away from all disembodied language. Moreover, my embodied language, which is my ability to express everything I'm able to express, I'm saying this again, my embodied language, which is my ability to express everything I'm able to express, keeps revealing what can only be revealed when one is satisfied about one's language. So, once you become satisfied with your own embodied language, you can only be satisfied with your own language, with embodied language, then you begin to actually reveal what you are able to say. And yeah, it is amazing how that continues, how that enhances your life. I cannot emphasize that enough, how ongoing embodied language is really where it's at. It's not just that you have a moment of embodied language or that you have a few moments. No, it is that you always have embodied language or as often as possible. So I have that skill, yeah. I have this crucially important skill which I could only acquire by turning away. I've had to turn away from all disembodied language. And my ongoing embodied language, which is my ability to express everything I'm able to express, keeps revealing what can only be revealed when one is satisfied about one's language. Yeah. With disembodied language, you are perpetually unfulfilled. You are never complete. You are never totally pleased with your language. To the contrary, you keep making it seem as if there is something that is outside of the realm of language, which then requires your attention. And all sorts of topics are important to you, except how you actually use your language. That is, you are distracted into being busy with anything, and you are never actually really busy with yourself. Because being busy with your own language means that you are finally beginning to pay attention to who you are. Of course, this all begins with the simple and undeniable fact that you do not listen to yourself while you speak. That is the yeah, you could say the operational definition of disembodied language. It is the way of talking in which you do not listen to yourself while you speak. Furthermore, it is not even known to you that to hear yourself, you will have to speak differently. You will have to say different things. Because as long as you keep talking in the way that you have always done, you are not going to listen to yourself, since you just don't want to hear it. You don't like the way you sound, and that's why you're not listening. So to hear yourself, you have to say different things as well as sound differently. This is also something why you haven't done it. You haven't put this together. How you say it and what you say, it goes together. It's called congruence. Yeah? You haven't been congruent. You couldn't be congruent in your disembodied language. So I say again, to hear yourself, to be able to hear yourself and to have embodied language, you will have to say different things, but you also will have to sound differently while you're saying these different things. So now I want to make a little sidestep here, not in my writing, I'm still reading my writing, but I am just going to broaden the perspective of listening to ourselves while we speak. And I'm going to bring in what is happening in the United States today. What is happening in the United States today is remarkable because Trump, signifies a major development in the right direction of saying something which is entirely different what politicians until now have been saying, and it is also sounding differently than how politicians until now have been sounding. Yeah, nobody talks about this, but I do. You could say that a lot of what the Trump team is saying is being said because everybody that is involved in the Trump administration, all the people on the right, they want to say it. And yes, the American people want to say it. And what is it that we want to say? What is it that everybody wants to say? What we want to say is that we are free and we live in the country of freedom. Yeah, although this is of course great, make America great again, it doesn't mean that Americans now have embodied language instead of disembodied language. To make America great again is only going to happen with embodied language after our disembodied language has been stopped. What we believed to be great with our disembodied language was really not at all great. And once we stop our disembodied language and have embodied language, we realize that the greatness is actually in our future, in our development of our embodied language, in our ongoing embodied language. Any reference to what was is inadvertently a reference to our history with disembodied language. Unless we begin to have embodied language, there is no history of embodied language to refer to. People have no idea how different everybody sounds once they have embodied language and once they say the things which can only be said when we listen to ourselves while we speak. As I have stated several times in my previous videos, the way forward is not going to be determined by any kind of group behavior that is maintained by our disembodied language. The way forward is going to be determined by our individual behavior, our freedom, which will only come into full focus with our embodied language. Embodied language is truly the language of freedom, the language of our future. Although there is in the new administration an attempt to frame things in terms of the restoration of common sense, we have yet to hear anyone talk about the necessity of having embodied language to be able to live accordingly. If we know the difference between our disembodied language and our embodied language, we realize that we have always vaguely referred to embodied language as common sense. So what we have referred to as common sense is of course more precisely articulated our ability to have embodied language instead of disembodied language. So once we know about the difference between disembodied language and embodied language, we realize that what we have always vaguely referred to as common sense is of course more precisely articulated our ability to have embodied language instead of disembodied language. Likewise, we have also expressed the hope that cooler heads may prevail, or that presumably we appeal to each other's better angels, but each of these are in fact failed attempts to address the tremendous importance of having embodied language. Similarly, we have talked about things like accountability, about realism, about consciousness, reliability, even wisdom or enlightenment, and yet we have never addressed or acknowledged the difference between our disembodied language and our embodied language. If you happen to hear this video, you must know that everyone's attention is always going to other things than to how we as individuals deal with our language. In essence, anyone who hears me speak at this moment Anyone who understands what I'm saying must now admit that everyone is in the dark about themselves due to their unconscious participation in disembodied language. You could say that as long as we have disembodied language, we have given up on our own freedom, no matter how much we may be talking about it. We can only be truly free as individuals, but not as part of a group. And this is also why each of us must be alone with him or with herself to explore the difference between our own disembodied language and our own embodied language. Yes, we each must admit to ourselves that these two ways of dealing with language exist, and that we have all been conditioned to have disembodied language, and that to have embodied language, we must stop our own disembodied language and step out of our conditioning history, as this is what is needed to be free and to have embodied language. So, what I'm saying here is that to have freedom, we must have embodied language. We can, after we have done that, after we have stepped out of our history of conditioning with this embodied language, and then we can have embodied language, then we can have embodied language together. And then we will also have embodied language together without ever becoming part of a group again. And this is another issue which I will still elaborate on a little bit because I'm now putting my writing away. I still want to reiterate that once we have embodied language, we will never be part of a group again. That is like almost like unbelievable. But our membership to groups has historically always been conditioned, ingrained, um, continued with our disembodied language. In embodied language, we are going to not only be free, but enjoy our freedom. And we are going to enjoy it so much that we do not want to give up on our freedom anymore in order to be part of any kind of group. And that is where I'm coming from. That is what I'm saying. And that is my language enlightenment.